Welcome to the PCN Capital Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Today the subject is legislative priorities in the PA Senate. But first, we're joined by Justin Schweitzer, Managing Editor at City and State Pennsylvania. Welcome to our program, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
Governor Shapiro approved a new state budget that had been 4 months late just last week. How does the final budget compare to the one he proposed way back in February?
Yeah, as you said, Larry, it's been a long time coming. It seems like we've been waiting a while for a final state budget to materialize, and we got one last week. Governor Shapiro, back when he proposed his executive budget proposal in February, called for a lot of things that ultimately didn't make it into this final package. Shapiro had championed new revenue sources, things like legalized recreational cannabis and regulated and taxed skill games, these gaming machines that you may see in bars, clubs, gas stations, things of that nature. Those major revenue sources that the governor had called for ultimately did not make it in the final budget proposal. So they may, reappear next budget cycle in a couple months. Those pieces were missing, and those were something the governor had pitched in part due to the state is experiencing a structural deficit where over time revenues aren't expected to keep up with expenditures. So we'll see whether those come back into play in the next budget cycle. But there were a number of things in here that were bipartisan wins, that were championed by both sides. And I think both sides are ultimately happy that this process is done, it's out of the way, and they all got some things they can take home to their constituents and be proud of.
According to the governor, what can this new budget deliver to Pennsylvanians, Justin?
Yeah, I think one thing you've heard from the governor is tax relief. The state has been in the process of lowering its corporate net income tax. That's something that continues. It'll lower, tax burdens for businesses. And he's also been very proud of a new working Pennsylvanians tax credit that will essentially allow taxpayers who took advantage of the federal earned income tax credit to take a state level tax credit as well. So this is something that's supposed to benefit low and moderate income Pennsylvanians. And that's something he's been very proud of since signing it into law last week.
Justin, what's in store for education funding this time around?
Yeah, so there's some interesting pieces there. As we know here in Harrisburg, there was a landmark ruling from the Commonwealth Court semi-recently that, ruled the state's current system of funding public education to be unconstitutional. So lawmakers in this budget continued to increase funding for things like basic education, special education, and there's also another adequacy installment, which is designed to help get some of these schools that were deemed to, not receive enough funding. It's supposed to help them out. And there's also some big changes coming to how cyber charter schools are funded in the Commonwealth. That's, as the governor has said, supposed to save public schools about, 170 plus million on payments in the aggregate per year. But that's something that has peeved cyber charter leaders and cyber charter advocates who, are going to feel a funding hit as a result of that reform. That's been something that's been championed a lot by public school advocates. So we're probably going to see some fallout from that in the coming months as we get ready for the next budget cycle.
Justin, the governor has agreed to withdraw Pennsylvania from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and briefly refresh us on what that is.
So essentially, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative was something that Governor Wolf kickstarted back in 2019. He signed an executive order to essentially get Pennsylvania into this regional cooperative that places a limit on the amount of carbon emissions that power plants can produce. It's what's known as a carbon trading proposal, carbon regulation proposal. It's something that really worried a lot of Republican lawmakers, some labor unions, because they worried it could cause fossil fuel burning power plants like natural gas plants and coal plants to close prematurely. There's been a lot of back and forth on this over the years, and it ultimately got tied up in court where it hasn't really gone anywhere. since then. So, this was a piece that I think Governor Shapiro was willing to trade away to, bring this budget impasse to an end. And so ultimately, this effort, which was about combating climate change, trying to lower Pennsylvania's emissions from the power sector, that's going to go away.
Now, if you would consider this, Justin, the governor withdrawing Pennsylvania from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, if you would consider that a concession, then what did Governor Shapiro get in return?
You could point to increases in public school funding. I know another thing that he mentioned during his bill signing was that, there were some, on the other side of the aisle that, he claimed were pushing for, lower funding levels for things like Medicaid. And so, as we're seeing a lot of uncertainty around healthcare and the federal political climate, that's something he pointed to as a big victory, that not only, did those funding levels remain the same, they increased. So I think that's a big win for the governor.
Justin, last question. Now that this budget has been finalized after being 4 months overdue, and maybe we had the benefit of some hindsight at this point, what seems to have held it up for 4 months?
I think it was clashing priorities at times. Republican lawmakers have always been very vocal about, their desire to curtail spending, keep spending increases as small as possible. And, they didn't want any money removed from the state's rainy day fund. So I think there was an element of fiscal responsibility that Republicans wanted to see, while Democrats had priorities they wanted to address. Some of them, it seems, were in this budget, like increased education funding, cyber charter reforms, things of that nature, and other things, like cannabis legalization and some other initiatives were left out. So, I think ultimately it comes down to differing priorities and different views on how to deal with the state's fiscal challenges.
Justin Schweitzer, Managing Editor at City and State Pennsylvania. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
More of the PCN Capital Preview after a short break.
PCN proudly brings you coverage of the Pennsylvania State Legislature. We bring you the State House and Senate floor proceedings as they happen, unedited and complete. Our mission includes committee meetings, budget hearings, interviews with prominent legislators, and other public policy forums. PCN is your destination for the best in Pennsylvania legislative coverage on cable and PCN Select. PCN is Pennsylvania politics and policy. Watch PCN's coverage of Pennsylvania politics and policy, history and culture, sports, and more with the PCN Select app. Stream live events and video on demand from your favorite device. Politics and policy programming is available for free. No subscription necessary. Go to PCNTV.com and subscribe to access live sports streams and the full video on demand library. Download the PCN Select app to start streaming today.
Welcome back. Our guests are Democrat Senator Patty Kim and Republican Scott Hutchinson. Welcome to our program. After 4 months of delays, the state budget was signed by Governor Shapiro. Senator Hutchinson, what do you think of the final result?
Well, first off, I want to say I think everybody, the legislature, the people of Pennsylvania, local governments are relieved that this 800-pound gorilla is now off our backs. Glad that it's done. However, I am still concerned. We did, thankfully, reduce the spending that the governor proposed by $1.4 billion. So it does come in under his original proposal that we got back in February. However,
$50.1 billion is my understanding.
That's correct. We're down to $50.1 billion. He asked for $1.4 billion on top of that. So I'm glad we got that number down. However, I still think that we have relied too much on one-time revenue sources, different reserve funds and lapsed funds. And so using that one-time money to balance a budget that includes mostly ongoing programs, that is a concern for the future. And that's the technical term for that is structural deficit, meaning spending more each year than what is actually coming in the door that year. So that concerns me. So in that respect, I did vote against the spending plan. I was in favor of several of the related bills that came with that, but in the end, I'm worried about tax increases in the future to cover that structural deficit. So with good conscience, I couldn't vote for the spending plan itself.
Senator Kim, what did you think of the final budget?
Like Senator Hutchinson, I am too relieved. You know, we received those letters from school districts, from human service agencies. The stress they endured, the unnecessary stress that they endured with this late budget. Glad that we're done. And I think that this budget is a great example of the product of a divided government. So the governor proposed, you know, $51 billion. Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats wanted $47 billion. So we're kind of in the middle. I think each party got something that they can take home, as Justin mentioned earlier in today's program, that we can deliver to our constituents. Some of my priorities are quality public education. And I have 2 school districts that have been historically underfunded. This will give them relief. I have a school district that raised its school property taxes to the max. It received about $500,000 a year for a $2 million hole in their budget. They can't tax anymore. These poor residents can't do anymore. It is incumbent upon us to give them some relief. So the $526 million that will go to these underfunded school districts will help 2 of my school districts, which is badly needed. Also, you know, when it comes to more teachers, there'll be a stipend for teachers who are trying to get the required hours but get paid at the same time. We have more money for mental health services in the schools. A lot of the kids, the teenagers are just, they're struggling. And to have a psychologist in every school, they should have actually more, but you know, what we can afford, 1 psychologist for the students so that they can have some counseling. And then also for facilities. I think a lot of schools have delayed their maintenance projects. This money has about $100 million that will go to school maintenance. So schools are important to me, and this budget delivered. We didn't get everything we wanted, and that's okay. Again, this is a divided government. We have to compromise. You know, the rainy day fund is still intact at $7.5 billion. Some people in my party wanted to take that out. So I think the residents of Pennsylvania should be happy. It took way too long, and I'm going to do everything in my power as a rank and file member to make sure that we're on time next year. But it's a good product, and I think people can feel good about it.
Senator Hutchinson, let's explore education funding in your district then. My understanding then is that education funding is up 7.5% for every school district. How much is it going to help in your territory?
Well, that number you're quoting, that 7.5%, is depends on which school district you're from. My districts, rural, small districts, have really don't get that much more. They are certainly happy that they did get an increase.
So that figure could vary, 7.5% school to school?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the struggles that we have every year when we're talking about how much education funding do we put in the budget, and how do we distribute it? Just how we distribute it is always a contention between smaller and maybe less wealthy school district versus districts that have much more growth and a lot more wealth creation going on in their districts. So my districts are traditionally much poorer and smaller, but we have other challenges. You know, certain things that we have to maintain a much bigger budget for transportation because our students live far away. We can't necessarily consolidate buildings very easily. Lots of those kinds of pressures remain, and so it's my contention, and I think most rural legislators feel the same, that we do need additional funds over and above what the average school district would use in order to operate a efficient and well educating school system.
I'm not sure about Senator Hutchinson. Sorry, I'm just from the from the House. Everybody's representative. I know he's from the House as well.
Take your time.
But another thing that I really liked about the state budget was a $40 million increase in special education. One of my school districts, the largest in, I think the 5th largest in the state, is going to add 10 more classrooms for children with autism. That number is exploding. We need qualified, trained teachers to educate these kids. And so the $40 million increase, not $40 million alone, but an increase, is really important for my school district. So I was glad to see that.
Senator Kim, keep the floor for a moment, because a few minutes ago I was talking to reporter Justin Schweitzer about the governor eliminating RGGI, sometimes called RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. How did that end up in budget negotiations, and what does it mean that it was left out?
So again, we had to give up something to get a product. And I know that a lot of the environmentalists are not happy with the elimination of RGGI or pulling it out of the lawsuit.
And the idea is to make power plants pay for their emissions, right?
Absolutely. But I know that the environmentalists and labor unions agreed that RGGI may not have been a good fit for Pennsylvania. So the governor put together another energy plan that would basically customize an energy plan that works for Pennsylvania, because as you know, it's regional. You know, it's in the states surrounding us. It may work for them, but may not be good for us. So it was on the chopping block. It didn't make everybody happy, but I think that was one of the more types of negotiating tools that could be used. So again, it was a compromise.
What did you think of that development, Senator Hutchinson?
I am thrilled that we were able to get that in the budget agreement. What RGGI is in the end, it is a tax that the consumers would pay for electricity, and I don't think there's any consumer out there that thinks their electric bill that comes every month is too low.
Now, is that merely an assumption, Senator, that it would be passed on necessarily to customers?
It would absolutely be. There's no mechanism for the producers of electricity to just fork out $800 million more per year. That means the consumers would be paying that, and I don't think there's when people, they would have sticker shock if they saw that additional on top of what they're already paying, high electricity rates, and it's really it's an additional burden on Pennsylvania because we are an energy producing state. We export a vast amount of electricity, which means we have jobs in Pennsylvania producing that electricity. Having this RGGI tax hanging over the heads of energy producers has meant that they have not been building the generation that we need. And if it was being built, it was much more lucrative to build it in other states because those, say build a new electric generation facility in Ohio and then sell the electricity to Pennsylvania, and the consumers of Pennsylvania would be paying the tax, but those jobs of the electric generation would not be produced in Pennsylvania. So it was a backwards idea. It did go to court mostly because there's a constitutional question with this. Can the governor, by executive order, increase taxes in Pennsylvania? And that was the crux of the court fight, and it's still hung up there. And with the uncertainty of it being stuck in court, this bill will take it off the table for. The uncertainty will be gone. We're not having RGGI. That's a good thing for the consumers of Pennsylvania. And now we can hopefully build some more generation here in Pennsylvania.
And Larry, I think we could do both, something that's good for the consumers and something that is good for the environment. And the mantra for a lot of Pennsylvanians is doing nothing is not an option. So if RGGI is off the table, I hope that we can look at the governor's plan with his energy plan, Pacers, the lightning plan, to see how we can reduce the carbon in Pennsylvania and be responsible job creators and energy creators as well.
I actually think that the most critical thing we have to do today is build more reliable energy sources. We need electricity that is 24/7. It's being produced 24/7.
And after all, data centers are coming to Pennsylvania, right?
That's on top of, we've been talking about this issue. Senator Yaw, the Environmental Resource Committee, we have actually met with some other energy producing states. We've met with legislators from Ohio on 3 different occasions, a hearing over there, a hearing in Pennsylvania.
What did we learn over there?
We learned that many of the non-energy producing states, we transmit electricity to a lot of our surrounding states that are members of RGGI, and their energy policies are hurting Pennsylvania, hurting Ohio, because we are both energy producing states. And so the discussions have been, what can we 2 energy producing states do so we are not as affected by policies in other states? And that's, lots of talk about, should we withdraw from PJM or create our own PJM, which is the grid in effect that covers multiple states, because we don't want our consumers to be paying higher rates because of policies in other states. So I think it's something that we have to invest in reliable energy sources, not the ones that depend on, is the wind blowing? Is the sun out today? We need base load energies like natural gas, coal, nuclear. Those 3 types they're on 24/7, and it doesn't matter how cold out it is or warm. That electricity can be produced, and that's the kind of energy we need, so we don't have rolling blackouts.
I like to piggyback on what the senator said. I think we have an energy problem. I know I read an article today that people's utility bills are much higher and the delinquency rate is higher as well. So if we're already having a problem now, before the surge of data centers, we're going to be in a lot more trouble later. And so I think we need to pump the brakes. I think a lot of these municipalities who have a structural deficit are eager and maybe desperate for more tax revenue, will pass the laws to accept these data centers. I think we need something maybe statewide to, again, pump the brakes on the creation of data centers, because as a city council member, I knew how important tax revenue. We didn't want to raise taxes on our folks, but if we can get a business to come in and help pay for our school districts, great. But I just want to make sure that we're careful and responsible for the environment and for the grid and everything above, that we have to be responsible and careful.
Sounds like you're saying that legislators got to stay one step ahead of this development of data centers.
Absolutely.
I think that's true, although there is definitely, there are going to be data centers built in the world, in America. I'm hoping that some of those come to Pennsylvania. But notwithstanding that, go back 5 years, that's when we started talking with other energy producing states, because the handwriting was on the wall long before data centers being talked about, that as we close reliable energy producing generators, many have been closed in the last several years because of regulations, because of federal tax policy and state energy policies. A lot of the coal producing plants have been closed. And meanwhile, at the same time, even without data centers, people in America are using more electricity. Get out your cell phone. That's run by electricity. More electric vehicles, and example after example of using more electric generation, but not producing the electricity. And this is, I say again, long before data centers being talked about. So we have to make sure that we are increasing the amount of energy, reliable, continuous electricity is being produced. And again, I also think that on top of that, AI, the data centers can be built behind the meter. They can use the Marcellus gas that we have in Pennsylvania and do a direct connection between the well and the data center and generate their own electricity. And these...
Sounds like you got to build some infrastructure.
Yes, but it'll be less infrastructure to do it that way than to do it, put it on the grid, and then ship it somewhere.
So I have a great example in my district with, it used to be called 3 Mile Island, but Microsoft has decided to reopen the nuclear energy plant. I talked to one of the workers who spent the last 3 years decommissioning it and then had to turn around and start bringing it back up. But they're a great example of creating their own energy to fuel and bring up the data center. So they're being responsible. Nuclear energy, as you know, is a clean source of energy, and I'd like to see more companies do that.
Do we have to see any more approvals come through before 3 Mile Island comes back to life under another name?
It's smooth sailing from here. Yeah, it will happen next year.
That is a great, innovative, entrepreneurial idea, and I'd love to see those kind of things happening. Who would have thought that you could reopen a nuclear facility? And again, it's to power the new economy that's coming forward, whether we like it or not. That new economy is coming. And the innovative people of the world can figure out, here's how we can power that. I think it's a great example.
And they have the money to do that.
Yes, oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Let's get back to the budget that was signed by Governor Shapiro last week. And as far as education is concerned, let's talk about another aspect of education. When I was talking to reporter Justin Schweitzer a few minutes ago, he said changes are on the way for cyber schools. What's your understanding, Senator Kim?
In the budget, there will be a savings of, I think, about $175 million that school districts don't have to reimburse the cyber charter schools. As I get older, I know that there's always a small group of people that ruin for the rest of people. So not all politicians are corrupt and terrible. Scott and I are one of the good ones, right? But there's a small group that always ruins the reputation for everybody else. And so I think there was a couple of bad apples in the cyber charter school world where the school districts, the vast majority of school districts passed a resolution to have some kind of cyber charter reform. The school districts are having trouble paying out their bills, whether it be transportation, special education, teachers and whatnot. And a chunk of that went to cyber charter school reimbursement, and they just felt that it was unfair. Cyber charter school doesn't have buildings like the school districts. They don't have the same accountability and whatnot. So I think this was another compromise that was a product of this budget, and that it will stay. And I think a lot of the school districts are sighing a big relief that they don't have to pay the couple $1 million a year for cyber charter schools.
How do you view that, Senator, cyber charter schools in your district?
First, I want to say cyber charter schools provide a very important avenue, different kind of learning for certain students that this is the best option for them. Several with maybe social emotional problems, maybe they're in a situation where they're being bullied, maybe they're just a better learning method, and I think families of Pennsylvania should have that option. They should have the option of doing the best kind of education that suits their children, and that's a family decision, and I think cyber charter schools fill a very important niche, and we have to make sure that as we look at them and make changes like were proposed this year, we have to make sure that we are not forcing them out of business. That being said, I think that again, for folks who don't know, cyber charter schools are public schools, and so that the funding they have is paid by the taxpayers, and it should be very transparent. There should be restrictions on it, and we have to keep a close eye on these public dollars. So, but in the end, cyber charter schools, again, an important choice, an important way for some students to learn and help them thrive and do their very best. And so we have to make sure that we're not forcing this option off the table with our changes.
All right, Senator Hutchinson and Senator Kim, I'm going to give you a break just for a minute while we look at program notes for here on PCN. Tomorrow on the PCN Capital Preview, the topic will be priorities in the PA House. The guests will be Representative Jared Solomon and Representative Martina White. They'll be here tomorrow morning live at 9 o'clock. Focus on Aging Adults returns this week. The topic will be avoiding holiday scams. Mary Bach from the AARP of Pennsylvania and David Shawcross from the PA Attorney General's Office will be our guests. They'll be here on Wednesday at 7 p.m. On the issues this week, animal cruelty laws will be the subject with Representative Christina Sappi. She'll be here on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Then right after that, lawmakers are debating whether to put a tax on so-called skill games. Senator Jean Yaw explains Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. A journalist roundtable, our guests will be Mark Levy from the Associated Press, Denise Clay from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Lindsay Weber from the Morning Call. They'll be here Thursday at 7 p.m. Now, on to the history and culture side of programming. The America 250 celebration continues when PCN visits Pennsylvania's African American cemeteries. That's today, Tuesday, at 8 p.m. Its history takes a tour of the Joseph Priestley House in Northumberland County. That's on Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Now let's turn to sports. PIAA Cross Country Championships are coming your way on Friday. The action starts with the girls' Single A finals at 7 p.m. Other divisions follow late into the evening. So visit PCNTV.com for the latest schedule. You can watch this show and all our public affairs programming free of charge by visiting PCNSelect.com. While you're there, you can download our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. All right, we're talking about legislative priorities in the Senate. We've been talking about the last week's budget. And let's consider just for a moment a theory some of our guests have had about why the budget has been delayed this year. And we had some former lawmakers, and they blame changes on communication style. They say there's less face-to-face than in the old days. What can you say about that, Senator Hutchinson?
Unfortunately, I think that is a big part of it, is the communication thing, the lack of, and I think I saw several of your shows where former members, including the former Speaker of the House, Democratic Speaker, who talked about years past when. Particularly, he was referring to Governor Rendell.
Was that Bill DeWeese, perchance?
Yes, it was. Yes, my friend Bill talked about face-to-face meetings where the governor would take a leadership position and bring everybody together and hammer it out. And he was relentless at that. It was about...
That means bring them into the same room physically?
Right. And lock the doors.
What do you know?
Yes. So again, that's a sign of leadership. And in the end, I believe you have to talk to make these things happen. And although there were lots of discussions through the summer, from the end of June through late in October, that included the leaders of House, Senate. The governor was not as engaged, and that's it seemed like his engagement was more from the outside, but in the end, I think I'm glad it finally came together, and all three parties, House, Senate, and governor, hammered it out at the end.
What do you think, Senator Kim? Obviously, your personal history doesn't go back nearly as far as former Speaker DeWeese.
It doesn't, but still like the guy. So I think there are a couple things. The governor put out his budget proposal back in the spring, and we had several months to get it done. I remember one of the leadership in Senate Republicans said, 2 weeks before the deadline, that I don't think we're going to get this done, and it was incredibly frustrating experience. I have teenage kids, always taught them not to procrastinate, and we just procrastinated month after month after month. I don't know what the leaders were thinking. I'm not in that room. I don't have privy to be in that presence, but it's a divided government, and each party wants to make the other party look bad. So whether it be the governor, the leader of Pennsylvania has a late budget, maybe that was a win. I don't know. I can't say for anything for certain, but I really hope that we learn from our mistakes. Innocent people working hard, especially with human service on a county level, thinking about furloughing workers. That is a painful experience. While we sat here waiting for a budget to get passed for 5 people to get it together, we can't live like this. And I'm hoping that I'm going to make sure that we have a different outcome next year.
Let's spend the next 15 minutes or so on individual legislative things that you're working on. Senator Kim, you know that there have been conflicts with federal immigration officials around the country. Some of them are violent. I understand there was an incident in your district in March. Can you tell me what happened there?
There's been several incidents, but I think the one that you're talking about is when we had folks from the Bhutanese community get caught up with that. They were green card holders. They were here legally. As you know, in Nepal and Bhutan, there is a conflict out there, and these folks came here as refugees. They were picked up and sent away, and I know law enforcement has a job to do. I may not agree with the order, but law enforcement has a job to do.
These people were arrested?
They were arrested and taken to different facilities. There was very little communication. I am not in support of the way it is handled. I don't want to see masked people picking people up, aggressively separating them with their children and families. It causes chaos and stress for these families, which I've heard from them personally, and that is not, I don't think, the Pennsylvania we want to live in. We need to follow laws. I understand that. With all the money that's going into ICE, the major funding increase, I wish we changed that direction into how to give people, citizens, a pathway to citizenship, legal citizenship. These folks, with green card, they pay taxes, they work jobs that sometimes that we don't want to do. We should treat them with more dignity. And I was just appalled at what had happened, and the families are suffering, and it's just, we can't do that. There's got to be a better way.
Senator Kim, our time is limited. Can you explain your bill that would address the tactics used by police in immigration situations like the one you just described?
Yeah, so it's not my bill. The prime sponsors are Senator Saval and Senator Capoletti. I'm just a co-sponsor of it, but it would require ICE officers to have identification on them. Clear identification so that the citizens know who they're dealing with and not to be masked. There are exceptions where there are undercover detectives, police officers that need to hide their identity. There's an exception.
Is that usually the case? They're wearing masks, these immigration officials?
Most likely.
At least the ones I see on TV.
Yeah. So that could be the ones that are most aggressive. I'm not sure. But this is deteriorating the relationship between law enforcement and citizens. And I know that my police want to have a good relationship with the community. And when we have these tactics, it erodes the trust, and we need to change that.
Senator Hutchinson, let's talk about something you're working on. And maybe this ties into the budget that was approved last week. You have a bill that would streamline government, a very optimistic word, of course, streamline government. And so, in your opinion, how might government be streamlined here in Pennsylvania to give us better results? Try to be brief.
One of the things that I think you're referring to is our bill to eliminate some commissions and advisory boards that are on the books. Pennsylvania has almost 400 different commissions, advisory boards, that are on. They're still in statute.
Is that a lot compared to other states? Give me some perspective.
I'm not sure about other states. I just know that there's no possible way that we need 400 different committees and commissions like that. And it's proven by their track record, because many of these, we just chose 13 of those that we looked at closely. And
13 panels or commissions.
Correct. And
which ones jumped out at you? Can you tell us?
Yeah, okay. Greater Pennsylvania Council. Does anybody know what they do? Nobody does, because they don't meet anymore. They don't have members. They don't have full membership. We have one called the Interagency Coordinating Council. I think all the three panel people here today probably never.
So if they're mystery to lawmakers.
Yes, yeah, we're insiders, and we never heard of them or saw any good product coming out of them. So we took a modest approach to say, let's get rid of these 13 and keep talking. And actually, this is building on a previous thing that happened in 2019, broad bipartisan effort. I think there was 15 or 16 that were done away with at that time, and we're trying to do the same thing again. This is a bipartisan issue. These boards and commissions that no longer function or have no results that are worth anything, or even we have some that are they were charged with making a report. They submitted the report, and that's all they were supposed to do, but they're still on the books. We just want to clean up some of our laws this way and streamline government this tiny little bit. Of course, lots more can be done, but that was the genesis of our bill.
Is there a sign this bill is advancing in the legislature?
We did pass it in the Senate, sent it over to the House a couple months ago. So I feel good. Again, as I said, back in 5 or 6 years ago, we did do a similar package, broad bipartisan support. I think there was at that point, I think maybe one senator voted against it, and I think maybe 2 or 3 House members voted against it. So it's an idea that I think is simple, but helps clean up things.
Senator Kim, let's talk about a situation where grandparents are raising their grandchildren. And just try to give us some perspective on this. In other words, about how many grandparents in PA are actually raising their grandkids, and why did that situation come to be?
Sure. So there's about 250,000 grandparents that are the primary caregivers of their grandchildren, and that number is about 90,000 kids. So we have grandparents who finish working, trying to experience their golden years, and something happens to their children where they're no longer able to take care of their grandkids. I've had groups come to me explaining the issue, and a lot of these folks are on fixed income. And to raise children, as you know, is very expensive. And so I have a bill that would help alleviate some of their financial pain. It's called Grand Families Assistance Program. And it would take some sources, funding for these grandparents and direct it through the AAAs, Erie Aging.
So these are grants for grandparents.
Absolutely, and they're for emergency purposes. And I think our AAAs across the state do an excellent job. They're on the ground, understanding their constituents, and I would trust them to have, very little, red tape. If they have relationships with the grandparents, if the kid needs new shoes or go on a field trip, there'll be some funding for that to, again, alleviate some of the financial burdens for the grandparents.
And what can you tell us about eligibility?
So with the AAAs, you have to be, I think, 55 and older. So we would be helping that.
Possibly an income limit too, would that be included?
Depending on the AAAs. I want to give them the...
Oh, is that so AAAs would have the discretion here?
They'll have the discretion, absolutely. Representative Maureen Madden in the House has a bill that would do very similar support for grandparents, but that money would come from the opioid settlement. So grandparents who are taking care of their kids because of a drug addiction with their kids, not grandchildren, would be able to tap into that settlement fund to help the grandparents.
Here's something you're working on, Senator Hutchinson, and it's called the Realty Transfer Tax Fairness. Can you tell me just what is that in simple terms?
So to back up a little bit, what it really there's something that's very concerning to me, and that is that state government agencies, including the Game Commission, but also including state system of higher ed, lots of other agencies of government that buy land, take it off the tax rolls, take it out of productive use, and it's lost to, and actually puts a burden on local governments.
What are they doing with that land? Why take it out of productive use?
Well, Game Commission is target number one, or I don't like to use that word, but they.
Give me an example.
They will purchase hundreds of acres, and unfortunately, in so many cases, there is no local input on that. They just, it's more land. They grab it. They don't pay any taxes.
No taxes on that land.
And in addition, people focus on the real estate taxes that they're not paying. But there's also when those transfers occur, many times they use a loophole. The Game Commission uses a loophole such that no realty transfer tax is paid. And remember, this is a one-time fee in this case. But if you really think about if land is in productive use, over time, it changes ownership. If you have a house and then someone else will buy that house, and every single time that changes ownership, there is a realty transfer tax paid, and such. And local governments depend on that money. But once the state agency gets hold of it, they're pledged to keeping it forever, quote unquote. And therefore, there will never, ever be realty transfer tax paid again. They use a loophole to even evade that realty transfer tax when they acquire it in the first place. So,
what does your bill do then?
Our bill just focuses on that original purchase by the agency that says that they would be required to pay realty transfer tax just like all other property owners do when they sell or transfer the ownership of property. I think it's a fairness issue, and again, this is a one-time thing for the commission, but it still means a lot of money to local governments that previously or all other forms of property transfers, a realty transfer tax has to be paid.
Senator Kim, I understand you have a goal to help Pennsylvania's steel industry. And before we get into that, just what is the status of the steel industry in Pennsylvania and how it's dealing with foreign competitors?
So I can talk to you about my steel mill in my district in Steelton. They were owned by Cleveland Cliffs. They decided to do away with the steel mill, to idle it several months ago. 500 workers were laid off, and now they're looking to close it permanently. And this community, is reliant on these steel mills, for generations. They have helped families, middle-class families, to thrive. And so steel mill towns need some help. And so I have a bill with Senator Piscatano of Pittsburgh, obviously, steel town over there, called the Forges Act. It's called Fueling Opportunities for the Revitalization, Growth, and Efficiency of the Steel Act. And what it would do would be two parts. It would incentivize companies to invest in the steel mill by giving them some tax exemptions, and then another component would be for people who want to make Pennsylvania steel-made products will have a sales and use tax exemption. So there'll be some fiscal impact to the budget, but I believe it's a sound investment. Nationally, internationally, there's more need for rail. New submarines are going to be built, and ships. We have that shipyard in Philadelphia. We still need steel. It's cheaper to do in the United States, so let's invest and make our steel here in Steelton and Pittsburgh and in between.
Our guests have been Democrat Senator Patty Kim and Republican Senator Scott Hutchinson. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
PCN's Ellen Franz talked to Senator Wayne Langerholtz about his proposal that could make firearms possession law the same statewide.
Welcome to our program. You've proposed a bill involving state preemption over firearms and ammunition regulations. What does that mean?
This is a bill that I've introduced several times since I've been in the Senate here, going back to the legislative session even of 2017, 2018. And what it does is it would allow third parties to sue on behalf of those that would be affected by any kind of preemption law that would be enacted by any kind of local municipality. And just kind of by way of background, the regulation or any regulation of firearms must be done at the state level, period. And it has to come through the General Assembly. That means the House, the Senate, and then ultimately the governor. What we were seeing were different municipalities, townships, boroughs, what have you, trying to enact their own firearm law. And it's quite clear from well-established case law as well as well-established statutory law and the Constitution that regulation can only come from the state. So they cannot do that. And what we're seeing were people that were getting cited for possessing, having a firearm when they're traveling through a municipality. And the municipalities, quite frankly, don't have that power to do that. So this gives a tool to those that are affected by that to have a remedy law.
Can you give an example of what it may be like for the firearm laws for one municipality versus another?
So if I like to analogize this by way of travel for the different states. There are different states that have reciprocity with Pennsylvania. And if I'm traveling south on a road trip, I have a concealed carry permit myself. I would check the reciprocity state list to make sure that I can conceal carry in that and then kind of adjust my trip accordingly. What was happening within the Commonwealth was these different municipalities would enact this law. Somebody's traveling from, say, Erie to outside of Harrisburg, and they drive along the way and they stop in a municipality that has enacted some law that is contrary to the state, and they're getting cited for that. So this just makes it very clear. It's already well established in law. This really shouldn't be a necessary law to enact, but it's very clear that this is not permissible. This just gives more teeth to those when they're challenging it, because if someone would then challenge that in court, they're going to win. The law is very clear, but then this just gives them the opportunity for attorney's fees and other reasonable costs. If they have to take off time from work, have to hire other witnesses, have to hire an attorney, they can recoup that. And it's meant to show these municipalities that what we've said from the beginning, that this is a state issue, period, not one that municipalities can weigh in.
Was there any specific incident that inspired you to propose this bill?
There's a couple cases that kind of happened prior to that, which kind of was the impetus for this. And actually, this was a bill that was even enacted prior to my time in the Senate, and I got this from one of my colleagues prior to that, as they passed that off and let me be the prime sponsor of that legislation.
What have you heard feedback-wise from stakeholders like gun owners and local government officials about this bill?
This bill in the past has received bipartisan support. This bill has passed, I think back in 2017, it passed with 34 Republican votes. So at that time, that's a veto-proof majority. So it's a common sense bill that just reaffirms the right to bear arms, and that Second Amendment right of the federal Constitution that's ingrained within the Pennsylvania Constitution, and Pennsylvania Constitution is even the right to bear arms should not be questioned. So it's even a little bit more solid in that respect.
Lastly, where is this bill in the legislative process currently?
This bill is in committee. It was in the local government committee. I actually just testified in front of the local government committee here a couple weeks ago to establish and take some testimony on this. I think some other individuals and other groups had testified as well. So we hope to get this through committee, through the Senate, and over to the House, and ultimately sign into law.
Senator Wayne Langerholtz, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks to Ellen for that interview. Before we go, here's a reminder about tomorrow's PCN Capital Preview. The subject will be priorities in the PA House. Our guests will be Representative Jared Solomon and Representative Martina White. They'll be here tomorrow morning live at 9 o'clock. That's it for today's Capital Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.